Well, with us in studio today is Grant Callen, founder and CEO of Empower Mississippi, and Senator Jeremy England, who represents District 51 in the Senate. Thank you both for taking the time to be with us.
Delighted to be here.
Well, we were
glad to be here, Lucien.
Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all making the time, and appreciate your interest in and work on school choice. I mean, this is something that I know, Grant, you and I have talked about for years. I mean, going back to the 13 work that Governor Bryant did, and Tate Reeves and Philip Gunn. How do you see? I mean, sort of talk to me about how you see school choice being, how that's going to play out in the 24 session.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of things that have happened both in Mississippi and around the country that has made this a big moment. And, there's been a lot of challenges with COVID-19, but one of the maybe silver linings of this is, for the first time for a lot of parents, they really saw what was going on in the classroom. They saw whether their kids were learning or not. And in some cases, they got a good look at their kids' school and said, man, this is amazing. These kids are learning. And in other places, it wasn't such a good look. And so around the country, there has been a boom. 8 states have passed some version of universal school choice that would allow parents to use public dollars to match their kids with a school that will meet their needs, that includes a private school. And what we've seen in Mississippi that has led to this, we've seen the largest exodus from public schools as a percentage of any state in the nation.
Really?
So 6% of our public school kids left during COVID and haven't come back. And they were already leaving, but it fell off a cliff during COVID. So yeah.
Do we know where they're? I mean, is it homeschool, private?
So
schools?
Homeschooling is way up. Private school is up, but there's a lot of kids that, frankly, we can't identify exactly where they are. So my guess is there are a lot of them doing something that looks like homeschooling. There's a lot of micro schools and kind of hybrid things and homeschool co-ops, and but all of that has fed into this growing demand by parents for more options. And the thing that makes this kind of an interesting year is we've begun to hear from lawmakers like we haven't heard in years. They're ready to do something on this issue, and they're hearing from their constituents that parents are ready. And, this is the first session after an election and the first session of a 4-year term. We're excited about the possibility.
It's the opportunity to do, you're right after an election, to do some big stuff. Senator England, what are your thoughts on school choice? What are you hearing from parents, and what would you like to see the legislature do this year?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lucien. And look, it's great joining Grant on here. I just got to say, Empower Mississippi does a lot of great things on this issue, and Grant does really good about having groups come together and talk about this issue that even you wouldn't expect to. Some dinners that I've been to with Grant will have Democrats, will have pro-public school folks, and Grant does a really good job at getting all the impressions. Now, what I'm hearing, of course, like Grant just said, we're seeing a boom of universal school choice movements in states around us. We've seen Arkansas do it. Of course, Arizona has done that. Iowa, Florida's always been there. And so now Mississippi can be looking at that. And I think it's something we need to look at. Talking to a lot of my constituents that homeschool, they worry about the lack of transparency of what some of the stuff they may see in the public school. And then on the other hand, and I think probably the bigger portion of these folks have students that just don't learn in that typical public school format. So they're able to pool resources. You'll have some parents teaching one subject and others teaching another, and it's really working out well for their students. So I think they're excited to see about what new possibilities we can come up with here in Mississippi. Now, I don't know if we'll see a jump to universal school choice or not. I think we might see us maybe tiptoe into the issue a little bit, which we tend to do here in Mississippi, and let the other states work through what they've got going on. Let the laboratories of democracy show us what works and what doesn't. And but we need to be ready to move on it, and I think we'll start seeing us take those steps.
Well, if you want to be part of the conversation, if you got questions about school choice, these are two of the people who are really going to be the tip of the spear on this effort this year. Join us on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. And this is really a question to both of you. School choice can kind of mean different things to different people. I mean, it can be I know people, we're not supposed to say vouchers, but it can be a scholarship program. it can be eliminating the ability for a home district to keep a student. I mean, what would you see as kind of an ideal? Let me start with you, Grant. I mean,
Sure.
if you're king for a day, what does your bill on school choice look like?
Well, and the background of that is there are three types of school choice that we talk about a lot. At charter schools, which are independent public schools, open enrollment, where it allows parents to move their kids between school districts, and then there is education scholarship accounts or education savings accounts, as they call them in some places, where it is a scholarship fund that parents can access, usually the state portion or some part of the state portion of the money that would have been spent on their child in traditional public school follows that student to a private school. So we support all three. We are optimistic that at least there will be legislation this coming session on possibly all three, but certainly two of the three. Charter schools, there's some real need to improve and expand the number of districts that are eligible to start a charter school. But the real energy right now is around ESAs, education savings accounts, and I'm optimistic that there's going to be a bill that would allow parents to access some of those public funds to shop around and find the best school, even if it's a private school, to meet the needs of their kids.
And how does that work practically? I mean, if tuition outpaces what the amount of the ESA would allow, would the parent would make up the difference, or the school would have to make that choice? Or?
So a lot of schools already have a scholarship program where they are raising money to meet the needs of low-income kids. So in some cases, it could be the school making up the difference. In some cases, it could be the parent making up the difference. There's also a new program in Mississippi called ACE Scholarships. That's a private funded program to help low-income kids afford private school. And their whole thing is we want to provide half the cost. So it could be that you could sort of mix and match and piece together the funds from a couple of different sources. But we want to make sure if an ESA is provided, it needs to be a meaningful amount that actually helps parents close that gap. Because for a lot of parents around this state, the cost of private school tuition, $5,000 or $6,000, is just it makes private education out of reach for a lot of families.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is almost a basic equality issue because high-income people have school choice right now. Legislature can't take it away from them. They can move it to a different district. They can write a check to a private school. But, the overwhelming majority of Mississippians can't afford a private school tuition, can't necessarily move to the district that they would prefer their kids to go to school in. So
100%.
Jeremy, if you had to pick, what would you see if we're going to tiptoe into it? I mean, how would you imagine something like this being constructed?
Yeah, no, look, I think Grant hit the nail on the head with the ESA discussion there. I think that's probably the way to look at this. I see a lot of folks. We have the Lighthouse School for children with dyslexia here in Ocean Springs, and so they're able to offer a specialized education to help remediate that issue that children have, and get them right back into their regular schools. I also, of course, nobody likes the idea of having a child stuck in a school district where either they have a certain issue holding them back, they have an income issue holding them back. And look, I have people in my own district here that concerns me that they go home to either a single parent home where the parent may have two jobs, or they go home to a parent that's not literate and they're taking this work and having to look at it. And there might be another specialized school that they could take an ESA and say, look, it's not a bad teacher issue with a lot of these schools. It's a home issue. So those parents need a different choice that doesn't exist to them now that they can't afford because they want better for their child, but they're just kind of stuck in a rut. And look, all of us, I'm a parent. I know Grant's a parent, probably more seasoned than I am. I think he's got more children than I do. So, but
I got more children than most people.
I know. I think you're trying to field a baseball team here, but we're still going. But and my kids are in public school, and it's working out great for them. But that just doesn't work for everybody. We shouldn't let zip codes and area codes decide where your kids go to school and what kind of education they get. And we know this in Mississippi that we can't keep trying to fit a square peg into a round hole for every single student in every single district. And like Grant says, every time we meet, he doesn't want just better education for our students in Mississippi. He wants a world-class education for our students in Mississippi. And if we have more options available, then we're going to be able to do that. And if I can, real quick, Lucien, I just want to say that one of the concerns I see when reading about this online is the idea of a big exodus from public schools, and other states just aren't seeing that. So I think that's one thing that's been addressed.
Well, we'll continue this conversation after the break. This is Lucien Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. We're coming to you live this morning from the Trustmark Bank studio. Life's beautiful when your bank fits you to a T. Trustmark, people you trust, advice that works. To learn more, go to trustmark.com, member FDIC. Well, we're continuing with a roundtable here with Grant Callen of Empower Mississippi and Jeremy England from the State Senate about what school choice could and should look like in the coming session. And you started to hit on this, Senator England, just before the break. One of the concerns I know people have is what this will do to the public schools. I mean, one of the comments we've gotten here on the C Spire text line is that this is giving up on public schools, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that criticism of this. Senator, you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lucien. No, look, this is absolutely not abandoning public schools at all. And look, we've made some great strides in public schools here in Mississippi, and that deserves some attention as well. You know, we've got the Mississippi Miracle, as it's being called, that we know, where we've got students starting to read at a higher level. We've got more literate students. We've got graduation rates up. We've got graduations up really high among our minority populations here in Mississippi. So we're doing some good things, and we don't want to ignore that or abandon that. But what we need to look at are these parents in the choice of parents to be able to maybe direct their students to something that works better for them. Like I mentioned, one of the biggest concerns I have are parents. We send these kids home with these books. We're helping them read. We're getting them through the third grade reading gate that we have. That's been a very successful program here. But we're sending them home to parents that may not be able to read. And those parents may be able to get an ESA and get them in a school that more focuses on that, or that remediates something like dyslexia or other learning disabilities, where we can get these kids. They go to these schools for a little bit and they get right back into public schools afterwards, and then they thrive. And it really changes. It's a generational change for these families, as a matter of fact, especially when you've got families that are stuck in a rut of living in poverty or living in a tough area. And education is kind of a gateway to get them out of that situation. And we need to make sure that there are more options available, and that we're not just sticking these students with what's not working for them and hasn't worked for their families in the past.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I concur wholeheartedly with the senator. I think the mantra ought to be first, do no harm. And there's a lot of kids that are thriving in traditional public school, and the last thing I want to do is pull the rug out from that. The good thing is there is mountains of evidence that a school choice program, when it's implemented right, and we plan to do it right here, that it will not only help the kids who leave, but it will help the overall system that they are leaving. And so whether you look at peer-reviewed studies, there's a meta-analysis of studies that I often refer to where they looked at 33 studies, and they were questioning not about the kids who choose through a school choice program, but they were questioning what happens to the public school system when a school choice program is implemented. In 31 of those examples, 31 out of 33, the public school system improved as a response to school choice.
Is that because of competitive pressure or decreased population, or
it's a lot harder to measure what it's from, but I think it's because you end up attracting students who were probably struggling already, who needed another option, who were not fitting in. I also think it's because of competitive pressure. I think when the constituency in the marketplace is opened up and public schools realize we've got to adapt to meet the needs of these students, or else they can go somewhere else, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
And then, stepping back, let's just look at one of the states that has done this longer than almost any other state, and that is the state of Florida. They started 20 years ago implementing a host of school choice programs. At the time, they were in the bottom 10 for their public education achievement in state rankings. Over 20 years, they've given parents expanded charters and vouchers and ESAs and tax credits. Today, 48%, nearly 1 in 2, 48% of the kids in Florida are in a school that's not the one they're zoned for. And the end result is, by a lot of different measures, they're in the top 10 And in some cases, they're the top 5 states for educational achievement, and that's their public school system.
Right.
So when you do it right, it helps. It's a rising tide that lifts all boats.
Well, and you hit on something there that I think is exactly right. I mean, we've got to, and y'all are here. I just think we got to get our legislature here. We got to get a lot of the people paying attention to this. We got to get away from the question of, how are we funding systems and start funding students? And, what matters is, to your point, what the outcomes are. I mean, if kids are leaving the educational system better prepared to be productive citizens, to enter the world, it really doesn't matter to me whether they went through the government school they're assigned in their district or a private school that taxpayers help pay for. I mean, that's exactly what we ought to be worried about. Not, are we hitting a specific formula number? Are we making the highly paid administrators who are politically powerful in their districts happy? It's can Timmy read and be a productive citizen? And y'all, I so appreciate the way y'all are thinking about this.
This is it's a change to say, let's focus on students first and get them what they need. And the truth is, we are always going to have a need for great teachers.
Absolutely.
And so we got teachers that are advocating alongside us for school choice because they see in any system we're going to need great teachers standing in front of kids, preparing them for life. And in a lot of ways, and under a school choice system, teachers have more freedom and teachers have more flexibility to meet students where they are. So you're exactly right. It's a shift in the way we think from funding buildings and systems and districts to saying we're going to fund students, and wherever these kids can get a world-class education and be prepared for life, that's where we want the money to follow the child.
What does this do? I mean, I know independent schools, especially schools with a religious bent, are rightfully concerned about government telling them what they can and can't teach. I mean, how does that work practically? I mean, should some of these independent schools or parochial schools, I mean, should they be concerned about government regulation coming in as a result of this? Well,
on the religious freedom issue, the Supreme Court has ruled through a couple of really important recent cases that if the goal of public funding is to give the child an education, and the child gets an education, whether they are at a religious school or a non-religious school is irrelevant. And so there's a strong caseload that shows that you can use public dollars at a Christian school or a non-Christian or a non-sectarian school, and there's no issues with separation of church and state. I think there is absolutely a risk of over-regulating the independent sector, the independent schools, if we're not careful. So I think it's very important that when we craft an ESA program, that we put the burden of compliance, the burden of accountability, that should fall on the parent to make sure their child is getting the right education and not fall on the independent school, the private school that's trying to educate the kids. Because the last thing we want to do is turn a vibrant independent school sector into what it looks like a public sector.
Right.
We want independent schools to maintain their independence, and we want parents to make sure their kids are getting the education they need. And that's, I think, a recipe for a better system. But we also need to remember this is not a static – the landscape is not static. What you've seen in every other state that's done this, and again, Florida is a great example of this, a boom in the number of new schools created. Educators step up and say, I want to meet kids' needs in my community in a unique way. And if kids are bringing a scholarship with them, the business model works. So in Florida over the last 20 years, they've had over 800 new private schools created statewide to meet students' needs. And I have no doubt we would see that here.
So we've got some great questions on the C Spire text line. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, join us at 601-879-4395. One of the questions that's been asked is, what do you do with children who are already in private schools? Would they be eligible for an ESA, or would there be some sort of waiting period, or how do both of you see that sort of factoring in on this bill?
Yeah,
I would.
So that is a tough
ahead,
question,
Jeremy.
obviously. Yeah, sorry, that is a tough question, obviously, because we don't, but again, if we're going to focus on the students, that's kind of where we have to look at that issue, I think. And look, I don't want to jump away from that question. I know we just watched the debate last night, and a lot of that happened, but I do want to jump back real quick to mention this other issue. I had a bill a couple of years ago that was designed to bring more transparency into the programs, where teachers would put their their programs and what they're teaching online. It would allow parents to go see what's being taught, and it would also allow other schools and other districts and other teachers to look and see what maybe other teachers are doing that's successful. I think that's something else we need to look at that could address that issue. And again, if we're looking at the parents who know their children the best, and we're looking at the students here, given that transparency, the idea of what's being taught in schools kind of takes care of itself for the parents that are wanting to look at that. Now, Grant, if you want to handle that really tough question, I think I'll throw that one to you.
Well, I think in states where you've done this, a lot of times they phase that in. So what's important for me is that the kids that are in the front of the line for any new school choice program ought to be the kids who are most in need, who have the most urgent, who are not already in a great education setting. And I think you could say down the line, let's phase in kids that are already in private school, because a lot of parents are struggling to make it happen.
Are already there. Can y'all stick with us for one more segment?
Love to.
Absolutely.
Well, thank
and
you
look,
so
Arkansas
much.
did that, Grant.
That's right.
Well, this is Lucien Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Stick with us for more about school choice. And this is Lucien Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. We're in our last segment here with Grant Callen and Senator Jeremy England talking about school choice. Grant and Jeremy, too, one of the things that's shown up a bunch on the SuperTalk, on the C Spire text line, is this concern that the regulation of independent schools is going to cause them almost to be an arm of the state, where they're going to have to be complying with a lot of the federal regulations that they don't currently, in a way that's going to cause them to be a less effective, and that some of them might want to not participate. Do y'all, I mean, how big of a risk do you think that is, Senator?
Yeah, I mean, look, I hear that a lot in my district, and look, when we were fighting that terrible Initiative 42 way back when, that was one of my concerns, is that what the state thinks is an adequate education could have hurt our homeschoolers, could have hurt our independent schools, but there's ways that we can look at this and do it. There's enough states doing this now, I think, that we can go look and see what's working. I think that parents and your listeners are right to be concerned with that, and it's something we need to look at. But I think there's ways that we can design this program that gives the parents the option that would also keep these government regulations out, because that's why they're successful. That's why these schools are successful, and we can't ruin that for them.
Yeah, I think Senator's right. I think there are a lot of models that we can look to where it has maintained the independence of independent schools and also empowered parents with new options for their kids. And so one of the kind of important takeaway points, if you're a lawmaker who's thinking about working on this or you want to work on this, let's make sure we put the oversight and any regulations that we're talking about public dollars here. So there has to be financial oversight and, to some degree, academic oversight. Put that burden on the parents, not the independent school. And that's one of the best ways to make sure that you still have a diverse and wide array of independent schools that are open, saying we want to educate more kids, because we know parents are going to have the freedom to shop around. Parents can meet the financial burden and the oversight, and they don't actually put that on private schools. So, yeah, and you've seen, Arkansas did this recently when Governor Huckabee Sanders has passed a universal school choice bill. And so one of the things that I just want to make sure is that there's a lot of things we have eased into or dangled our toes in the water in over the years that, like charter schools, we're 10 years in, and we've moved so slow that it has taken. We only have 8 charter schools in the whole state that are open. And
am I right, Grant, that we had a charter school bill well before 2013, right? It was law.
We did.
It just was totally inoperable.
It was so bad that not any charter schools were created. So if we move too slow, we will be the last state in the Southeast to do this, because Arkansas now has a universal ESA. Florida has universal. Louisiana is very close. And about 2 weeks ago, Governor Kay Ivey of Alabama said, we're going to be doing universal next year. We want to make Alabama the most school choice friendly state in the nation. And let me tell you, I do not want Alabama to get ahead of us on this. Like, let's do it. Let's go big. We can phase it in over a few years to see kids transition well and make sure it's not a shock to the system. But let's go big and not do something that's so small and meaningless that we get left behind.
Yeah, go universal or be last, essentially, based on what our competitors are doing. Senator England, what are your, obviously this is going to be a massive fight because there's so many entrenched interests here. I mean, how do you see this playing out in the legislative session next year, and what do you think its prospects are?
Well, so the reason there's going to be a fight, I think, Lucien, and I think Grant would probably agree with this, is that there's this idea out there that any type of school choice, movement towards school choice for parents is anti-public schools. And I think that that's going to be our biggest fight, that we're going to have to convince people otherwise. And look, I talked with, I had a dinner with one of my Democrat colleagues, and he was talking about a school that he hopes opens up in his area. And he was describing a charter school, but you know what? He couldn't say charter school because that's such a politically charged phrase and term that he can't do that now. So I think our fight is going to be, not going to our corners and wanting to throw jabs at each other and actually have meaningful conversations. But I will say about the, let's go big or go home issue. We when we recently passed medical marijuana here in our state, I think we did a really good job with that, with looking at what works in the 33 states or 34 areas that have it and what doesn't work. And we're starting to see enough states that we can pull to that. I would agree with Grant that we've really moved the charter school bill and the legislation we have. We moved that too slow. We need to allow that. Look, we don't even have good numbers on it because it's moved so slow. We need to see what that's going to do. So I agree with him there, but I still think, I like what Arkansas did with doing an implementation where they did it for 3 years and they just kind of gradually work it in. So let's see what they do.
Hey, Grant, and we've got about 15 seconds. You got any final thoughts there?
If you're a parent and you want to get involved in this movement to empower parents with choice, go to empowerms.org. Give us your information. We'd love to have you. This is going to take parents across the state stepping up.
That's I think that's what they call a plug in the business. Well done, Grant, and you're exactly right. Thank you for all y'all have done for this cause and all you're going to do. This is Lucien Smith in for Paul Gallo here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Coming up next is Fox News, followed by SuperTalk Mississippi News.